Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have you with us tonight. And you know what? We're going to be talking World Series coast to coast. So we're looking forward to talking about it. My crew tonight is obviously Candy Ebling. Welcome back, Candy.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
And we have Larry Bluestein, who I've known forever.
Yep. Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome. Thanks for being on tonight, Larry. And last but not least, George Eichhorn. Him and I started the Sports Exchange back in the 80s, and we get to do it again. So
yeah, that's right. Thanks for having me on tonight, too.
Just to let everybody know, we're going to talk about the World Series. This whole show will be dominated by the World Series. Then we'll talk about the Miami Hurricanes a little bit at the end. So let's go ahead to the chat rooms. All right, getting ready. I told people you were coming on, Larry. Look at this stuff here. And I mentioned Larry's coming on. Here's the deal. Okay. They're showing up. I should let everybody know that Larry and I did have
now he's got one on.
What's that?
They said George didn't have a hat on, so now he put it on.
Yeah, there you go.
Blas.
Yeah, there you go. He violated the dress code for like about 10 seconds, 15 seconds, but that's okay. But at any rate, Larry and I had the privilege of actually going to Dodger Town out in Vero Beach. You know, we both covered Florida State League games and spring training. So that was pretty interesting. Larry, why don't you give me some of your recollections of Dodger Town?
Yeah, quite a few of them, watching spring training there, when they built that or when they started moving in there, there was no fence. It was a hill. And so many times I remember some of the Reggie Smiths and some of those during spring training, trying to climb that hill to prevent a home run. And they had no dugouts. They had like a dugout with no tops on them. So it was kind of dangerous, but it was baseball at its purest. And they transferred everything from Los Angeles right to Vero Beach, including the Dodger dog and and everything that goes with it. So it was a lot of great fun and watching that and the entire complex of Dodger Town and Vero that's still around. And I visit up there, when I do a lot of football up in that area, I'll stop by there and, ride around and see. And it's real. They've really done it well. They hold a lot of tournaments, right, there for youth kids and also for high school level and and college even. So, you got to remember back in the day, when Vince Scully was announcing the spring training games there and a lot of history. Especially it's not a big town, but, they all used to stay on the beach side and they had, a lot of restaurants and a couple of watering holes that they would visit during spring training. And then, right after that, the Vero Beach Dodgers came in and, right, because at the time, Florida State League was a high Class A league. Mm-hmm. Now it's Class D again, but when it was a high Class A league, they used to send their top prospects there, like Jose Offerman and players who you would see down the line, Sid Bream, and I still remember a lot of those guys. When they signed them, they would bring them to rookie league, and then with the Dodgers in Vero Beach. So you got an opportunity, especially back in the day, Scott, as you remember. Mm-hmm. When you would see a lot of these players in the Florida State League, you knew that someday soon, 3-4 years down the road, that they'd be in the major league parks, and then you get to see them in spring training. And, I remember back in the day also, you look at the Orioles and guys like Cal Ripken Jr. and Eddie Murray, who came right up their farm system. And, that was a great thing about seeing Florida State League baseball. Wow. As George and I were talking before, you get to see the Lakeland Tigers and guys like Larry Parrish and Ron LaFleur and player Barbaro Garbe, guys who just kind of started out in the Florida State League. But it was fun to look back on, Scott, especially because of if you're a Dodger fan and, being 2,700 miles away, it made all the sense in the world when they went, to Arizona, but at the same time, it gave a lot of California people a chance for at least a month and a half to come to Florida and, and enjoy the weather and see some really good, because back in the day, you got to remember, basically all the big time teams were in Florida. Now they've relocated, to the Cactus League. And yeah, but the Yankees and the Orioles were always, fun teams to watch. Obviously, the Dodgers and the Mets being, at a few places from St. Petersburg and Pompano Beach all the way down now to Port St. Lucie for the last 30-something years. So, yeah. The one thing about minor league baseball, guys, that you see these kids when they first start, and then follow them throughout their entire careers. So yeah, it's great, especially in this World Series. I ran a picture today of Aaron Judge when he was in Class A baseball, and the Yankees were extremely high on him then, and that's the thing about this World Series, because you have two MVPs that were clear cut. They're right. Obviously, Francisco Lindor put on a great year, and if it wasn't for Ohtani, he probably would have won the MVP. But you got Ohtani, who's a freak of nature, 50-50 club, and hasn't pitched in a couple of years. I think he'll go back to that next year as well. But yeah, and then you got the stars on each side. Garrett Cole, who obviously I remember when he came out of UCLA, he and Trevor Bauer are both teammates. Now they don't like each other, but they're both teammates at UCLA. And yeah, I mean, he was with the Pirates, and I watched him pitch against the Marlins, and you get a chance to see a lot of these kids that are, playing in this World Series that, that made their mark. And it's really Carlos Rodon, when he was drafted by the White Sox. A lot of people are saying the Marlins should have picked him up. He came out of NC State, and, he's in the rotation. And, you look at Clayton Kershaw and some of the top players. The Dodgers have a great lineup up and down, and so do the Yankees. So I think that, this has all the makings of a really, really good, I think, 7-game series.
Yeah, I will say this. Every time I went up to Vero Beach, though, Larry, I always wanted to meet Vince Scully, but he was never there the time that I was up there. He only come in for a week across L.A.
right
down here, and I always missed him. That was a shame. But, you're right about the stadium. I mean, I don't think that the dugouts were enclosed. I don't think the entire stadium was enclosed at all either.
Yeah.
I mean, where you had protection for the fans against the elements. So, but other than that, if you're ever down in South Florida, you got to go to Dodger Town. I mean, you're right. Florida State League games, I saw my fair share of them. Spring training, I always used to like that trip. It's only like a 2-hour drive from where we're at. You take I-95, especially nowadays. And back then, the speed limit was like 55 miles an hour. Now you can get up there with your foot on the pedal on the metal and go a little quicker. And Katie's laughing at me because the way I put my foot on the pedal, it will definitely accelerate time quite a bit. But you're right. I mean, the one thing that we both can attest to, especially in the Florida State League, is I've met a lot of great friends in there, whether they were players that turned into coaches. I mean, I could spend an entire show with you talking about that. But, Stump Merrill was down here. Barry Foots, to this day, is still a good friend of mine. And I also mentioned the fact that not only are they good, Kevin Rand is a very good friend of mine as well.
Oh, wow. There's a name from the past.
Yeah, well, and keep in mind, I covered the Fort Lauderdale Yankees a lot, and you were covering the Miami Marlins when they were with the Orioles, and then the Padres, and then Independent. So, it was unbelievable time covering Florida State League, and I learned a lot of great journalistic lessons covering the Florida State League. So with that said, okay, we're going to bring everybody into this. You and me can reminisce all day, and darn well we always did, and no Florida State League situation would have ever been the same unless we had our buddy Sonny Hurst. So, Sonny, if you're up in heaven and you're watching this broadcast, Larry and I love you, buddy, and that's all there is to it, because you're the reason there is baseball in Miami in the South Florida area. But Larry and I are talking for you, Sonny. So God bless. All right. With that said, you were alluding to it a little bit now, Larry. Now we're going to get to it. The last time the Dodgers and the Yankees met, and that was in 1981 on October 25th, 1981, a Loge box ticket at Dodger Stadium costed $20, and this was in Game 5. All right, Candy, we'll bring you into it first. $20 to watch a World Series game. Not bad, huh, Candy, in 1981?
Not bad. Although, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, back in 81, even $20 would have been a lot, but I can only imagine what the tickets are going to go for this time.
Huh. I saw the cheapest ticket was $1,500, and that's standing. They had them up to $45,000 per game.
Oh, I'll get to that later in the show.
Don't even get me started with that. Just like the Super Bowl, they want you to support these teams throughout the year and, pay the high prices for football and baseball. But when they get into the World Series and the Super Bowl, for some reason, they kick you to the side, which is terrible.
Yeah, well, I got an updated numbers on that. I'll bring that up a little bit later in the show. But yes, $20. It would have been nice to go to a World Series game at $20. George Eichhorn, not a bad value.
Yeah, I mean, everything has gone up. It's incredible when you hear those numbers, though, from back in the day. It just shows you how much inflation has captured the American mind and the American way. But those numbers are just phenomenal when you think back to those lower prices. But it's been a long time since these two proud franchises met, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very happy that it happened this year. Whether you're a Dodger fan or not, or a Yankee fan or not, it's good for baseball. But it's something else, Scott, when you talk about those numbers for tickets and back in the day.
All right, well, Larry, before we turn you loose later in the show about what they are now, let's at least talk about the old $20 bill. You can get those out of the ATM, by the way.
Yeah, that's true. But like I said, when you take a look, Scott, about a lot of these programs, a lot of these teams want your support during the season. And this is something that this really is something that means a lot to me, because you try to get a generation to fall in love with a game like baseball, which, obviously is far behind the interest that's football. And then all of a sudden you show them, hey, come out, I'll use the Marlins for an example. Obviously the franchise is horrible, but the thing is they made an effort to try to attract fans by giving them cheaper seats plus the food. And that's how you have to do it. But then you get this group that falls in love with baseball, and then all of a sudden you start charging these crazy prices for the playoffs and for the World Series. Same thing with the Super Bowl. Like everybody balks at the when they go, oh, well, they may take the Super Bowl, to London or to Germany, but when you think about it, who cares? I couldn't go anyway. We couldn't afford to go. So, if they're going to make money, let them put it in Tokyo for all I give, but that's just bothersome, because you're trying to sell this sport of baseball. And like I said, it's really, baseball's declined in attendance and viewership in many areas, because, and I'm not talking about LA or New York, but I'm talking about the smaller market areas. I mean, you look at Tampa Bay and areas like that, it's just tough for them to get any, any following. And because of the fact that you make it what it is, and you put some of those ticket prices are crazy, and parking, and it's not as bad as it is in football. I mean, because you take a family of four to a Dolphin game or so, and you're talking $600-700. I mean, just for a family of four to go, with tickets and parking, and food, and they've priced themselves out of making new fans. It's almost, and when we were kids, George, you remember the World Series was on at 2:00 or 1:00 in the afternoon. And we used to sit in the classroom with our transistor radios. And, I remember being the 69, Mets and the Orioles, they played two games at 2:45 in the afternoon. So, you never got a chance to watch all the games. And then obviously money got in the way, and then they went to the night games, and then they went so late at night, they were cutting a lot of the kids out of that too.
Yeah. And I can remember in grade school, like you said, Larry, I mean, growing up in Detroit, when we had the Tigers there in 68, we had to beg the teacher to let us watch some of the game. And actually she did. Even back then, there was a TV in the school. But yeah, that's incredible. Everything's at night now. Everything's prime time. But thanks for
Yeah.
bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember those days as well too. You know, D. Lowe's is some pretty interesting stuff. So I want to go out there and mention. He says, "Rest in peace, Sonny." Now, here's what's so funny about the follow. I'm not sure if it's the same Sonny, but he has good barbecue. You know what? Can't debate that one. You know, that restaurant is pretty good, huh, Larry? Down here, Sonny's barbecue.
No, Sonny's barbecue. No, he has
Yeah.
nothing to do with that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But you know what? His mind is in the right place, anyways. All right, we're going to go on to Fernando Valenzuela, who actually pitched in that series. Unfortunately, he passed away yesterday at the age of 63 within 2 weeks of his 64th birthday, which is going to be November 1st. I remember Tom Lasorda raving about him at the 1981 baseball winter meetings in Hollywood, Florida, after the Dodgers went out there and won that. So, you know, Fernando obviously created Fernando Mania. And, you know, it's unfortunate that he had to die just a couple of days before the series started. But as I understand, he did have a bunch of health problems for a while, and we can't predict our departure from this earth at all, Larry. But the timing certainly could have been a little better. Some thoughts about Fernando Valenzuela, Larry.
Well, what he did do is he brought another country into the fold, bringing Mexican fans, and I thought that was really, really good for baseball at the time. You know, just like Ohtani, you know, and some of the other Japanese and you know, players that when you bring other countries into the mix, you get new fans, and that's what Fernando did. I mean, he was a novelty, big guy, always, you know, had that crazy delivery where his eyes were straight into the sky.
Yeah, right.
And he was a character, and the whole thing is that's what you need in baseball. And we have some, you know, we have a lot of characters in today's game. But Fernando's one of those guys, you know, he may not have been a Hall of Fame pitcher, but he was somebody who was a generational talent during an era, as you said, back in the early 80s, you know, into the middle 80s when the game really needed, you know, now it's got so much influence from outside the area, you know, from Dominican Republic and Venezuela and you know, but now you're looking for just anybody who's going to come into the league and you know, give it a new fan base. And I think that's what Fernando did, and great teammate. And as you said, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, I was watching him. He was at a little league field and talking to the kids, and he looked really frail. I mean, you remember when he was bigger, and she's weighed like 250, you know, and but you know what? It's a shame, you know, you get baseball players like that, and you get some of these athletes, and you know, they become iconic. And like I said, you know, I mean, you know, during the off season, or especially in LA, it was a perfect landing spot for him because, you know, the heavy population of Mexicans, plus, you know, it's a couple hours away, and a lot of fans got a chance to come up and see him. And it was a perfect storm for them. So yeah, rest in peace. And certainly we'll always remember him every time you see a picture or watch a video. And George, you know, I mean, you get people like that who are iconic, and like I said, may not have been a Hall of Famer, but certainly somebody who elevated the game.
Yeah, but you know what, Larry, before we let George comment on this, I read that Fernando Valenzuela, albeit like Mickey Lowe, has never gotten Hall of Fame, but the Dodgers don't normally retire numbers unless you're in the Hall of Fame, but they made an exception with Valenzuela. That shows you the impact that he had with that organization. One can only wonder if we'll ever see Lowell's number 29 retired. We won't talk about that tonight, but at least Valenzuela was a broadcaster for him for quite a few years, and also got his number retired, just like Lou Whitaker did in Detroit. George, I'll make the Detroit reference. You stay on point, okay? Because it's just one of those types of things. And here's the other thing. We talk about characters of the game. How about Mark Fidrich another lifetime ago as well?
Yeah.
Talking to the baseball and all that. So every time I think of Fernando Valenzuela, I go out there and think of Mark Fidrich as well. All right, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what a great character. What a great pitcher. I mean, you know, when I was doing some research today on him, I did not know he was around for 17 seasons. That's a long, long time. And you nailed it when you talked about his influence on baseball. The Mexican country adopted him. He was a folk hero there. He was called up as a relief pitcher late in 1980. But then look at these stats, what he did. He responded with a victory in his first start, 2-0 over the Astros, and he went on to start 8-0, including 5 shutouts and a 0.50 ERA. I mean, those numbers are just off the charts. He had a tremendous influence on baseball. And it is sad to see him go. And I don't wish that upon anybody, of course, especially he's, only in his 60s. But he contributed a lot. He did. And like you guys said, he stayed focused. He was in the community. He was helping promote baseball in Mexico and other Hispanic countries, and also as a broadcaster with the Spanish speaking. Obviously, that's a big thing in Los Angeles is the Spanish speaking play-by-play and color. So, yeah, it's a big loss, and it is unfortunate. It is that it's happening right before the eve of the World Series.
Okay, we'll turn over to Candy.
So, wow. He let's talk about him. He won the New York National League Cy Young Award and Rookie of the Year in 1981. He was one of 12 kids from humble beginnings in Mexico.
Wow.
And his feats in the mound made him hugely popular. He was dubbed one of the true icons of the Dodgers and of the game. He's very well loved. He was an all-star selection every year from 81 to 86 when he recorded 97 victories, 84 complete games, 1,258 strikeouts, a 2.97 ERA. He earned 2 Silver Slugger Awards and a Gold Glove. He actually is not in the Hall of Fame, but he is not in as a player, but there is memorabilia from his no-hitter that is actually in the Hall of Fame. So he had a no-hitter back in, I want to say, let me quick pull that up. I just had it in June 29th of 1990, a 6-0 victory over the St. Louis Cardinals at Dodger Stadium was one of his emotional career highlights. He struck out 7 and walked 3. He is nicknamed El Toro by the fans. He had an unorthodox and memorable pitching motion that included looking skyward at the apex of his windup. His repertoire included a screwball, making him one of the few pitchers of his era who threw that pitch regularly. And he wasn't known as a hard thrower, but he threw different pitches, which made him different. And I mean, what a career! Like, to know that you grew up in Mexico and you were one of 12 kids. Like, I can't imagine. He remains the only pitcher in MLB to win the Cy Young and Rookie of the Year awards in the same season. The left-hander was a National League starting pitcher in the All-Star game in 1981. It was the same year the Dodgers won the World Series. He is the all-time major league leader in wins, 173, and strikeouts, 2,074, by a Mexican-born player. During his career, he made the cover of Sports Illustrated and visited the White House.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And of course, he became a broadcaster too, so he's done quite a lot.
Well, I mean, obviously, when we talk about players that aren't in the Hall of Fame where their memorabilia is in there, I get that. I mean, you can even get Pete Rose's memorabilia in there. You're just not going to get him in there. And a guy who I've always advocated that should be in the Hall of Fame and isn't is Don Mattingly. But don't get me started on that because I really believe that Donnie should be there. But Fernando Valenzuela, to me, was one of those characters that you could see out of a comic book with everything that he did. And 84 complete games, Larry. Think about 84. how many? You're not even see that in Major League Baseball for 2 or 3 seasons anymore. The way this game has changed.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You don't, the Bob Gibsons and him and all those guys who were workhorses back in the day, the Denny McLeans, and when they used to have tons and tons of complete games, you don't see it anymore because it's just it's become specialized. It's a 6-inning world for starters, then you 7th and 8th for the middle, and then you go to your closers. So, and that's how baseball's evolved right now. And baseball pretty much now is all about computers and algorithms, and it's not so much, you coach through computers, and that's why you get a lot of these managers who are old-time managers, with the exception like Dusty Baker or so, that doesn't, always harkens themselves back to when it used to be just, let's show up to the park. I mean, there was no video you could watch there. It was, you remember Sparky Anderson and all, those guys would have no time for this. I mean, they're true. Baseball purists. They go in there, make their lineup, based on maybe scouting the night before. Right. And, you don't even see the pitchers used to sit in the stands before their next start the next day and chart pitches. You don't have that anymore. And that's sad because it's evolved. And this is, it's a shame for the younger people who are listening tonight. I mean, not to say that this generation or your generation, hasn't been fun and hasn't, but that's all It's just like, my dad used to tell me, back in the, 20s and the 30s and the 40s, how baseball evolved and you see clips and, George, you see, I was looking at a picture today of Babe Ruth back in 27. And he was up to bat, and there were these photographers, with their flash bulbs that must have been like 10 feet away. You don't see that anymore. And that's the thing, baseball's, everything. And it's not just baseball; it's every sport and every walk of life that things have changed. But just as somebody who grew up, and like I said, I became a Met fan because back in April of 1962, we were in New York visiting some relatives, and my dad and my uncle were supposed to go to the first game the Mets ever played in the Polo Grounds, and my dad got sick, and I had an opportunity. I think I was like 6 years old, and I had an opportunity to go. I really didn't know a lot about baseball at the time, but just going to that game. And I became a Met fan on April 11th, 1962, on that very day. And, followed suit 2 years later and went to the opener at Shea Stadium and was fortunate enough to go to the opener at Citi Field. So, a lot of people, like you guys, back in the day, you look at Briggs Field and all these, these parks that, set the standards in those days. And that's why you hate, when people kind of knock Wrigley Field or or talk bad about Fenway, but those are original pro stadiums where, when we grew up, those were iconic stadiums. And, that's kind of taken a little bit away from the game. But your original question was about complete games. And, you're not seeing them. Look at how many times over the last couple of years have they taken a pitcher out with a no-hitter?
No, I know. Don't even lead me there.
Yeah, only because they're on pitch counts and and that's the thing too. If you remember back a few years ago when the Washington Nationals sidelined Steven Strasburg because and that was it. And I kept saying, you know what? Toughen it out because you may never get back to this, to a World Series, and he never did. And I just think baseball, well, just all sports, but baseball, we're talking tonight, has become so specialized. Yeah. It's almost cookie cutter. It's almost, like Stepford Homes. It's everything's the same. And, I miss the old days of baseball, George. Those were the great days. I hate to. A lot of people didn't get a chance, but if you ever get an opportunity to watch some of the older films and some of the older clips,
Oh,
I mean, and you appreciate some of these players back in the day, like a Mel Ott, to know that he was 5'9", 160 pounds, and he hit 511 home runs. You know, I mean, that just doesn't happen, these days. And you had some, like you talk about. I mean, Denny McClain, he's not going to come close to winning 30 games. I mean, they don't just have that anymore. And I mean, it's, unless you have a really, like the Yankees and the Dodgers are at the place that they're at, is because they've had a great balance from the pitching standpoint of being able to have their starters go 6, have their relievers, go 7 and 8, and then have like a Clay Holmes or, somebody come in there and mop things up and win games. And same thing, without with the designated hitter too. I mean, in both leagues, it's taken strategy out the game. So, I mean, if you have, for every Kenny Holtzman, and somebody like a Tony Cloninger who could hit, Rick Wise who could hit, you have all these guys who are like 110 hitters and struck out every other time. So, that's the thing too. And the younger people listening, I mean, baseball back then, you could just picture how you could strategize games, and you'd have to make decisions. Nowadays, they're just kind of made for you.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'll say to this, hang on, Candy, is this: Abner Doubleday would turn over in his grave if, for 2 reasons. One, he saw the bullpen games where you're putting all these relievers out, and number 2. The other thing that you just talked about would be the strategy being messed around here by what we talk about, and that's a combined no-hitter. So Abner Doubleday, I know you're not listening to this, okay, but the reality is Abner would not want to see a combined no-hitter, and he wouldn't want to go out and see 7, 8 bullpen guys in to complete a 9-inning game. All right, Candy, go ahead.
Well, one of the other things you're not going to see again from Venezuela, if you guys might not know, he was a better than average hitter. He actually hit 10 career home runs. You're not going to see another pitcher hit 10 career home runs because they're not batting at all anymore.
Yeah, well, he like you said before, Candy, he won 2 Silver Slugger awards, and for a pitcher, I mean, I remember Rick Wise back in the day. He was a really good hitting pitcher. Kenny Holtzman was a really good hitting pitcher. I mean, you had him obviously back in the day. I mean, when before the DH, and that was like in the 70s, in the early 70s, late 60s, where everybody National League didn't, go to the DH like over the last 10, 15 years. And then they but before then, I still remember Richie Scheinblum as a DH, got up, and it's great to reminisce, especially because this year's game represents 2 franchises. Dodgers and Brooklyn Dodgers and the LA Dodgers and the Yankees, obviously, that are storied franchises that have had more than their share of great managers and great players throughout the years, and are often 1-2 in attendance. And that's, I'm sure that the Major League Baseball wasn't crying when these 2 teams had an opportunity to meet. It's really, really good as far as markets for TV markets and press. It's, I'm, as much of a National League fan as I am, not a big Yankee fan, and I'm sure you guys aren't either, but being Detroit guys, as you remember, they used to be in the same division. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Back
but
in the day.
I think it's going to be a great series, guys. I really do. And, as you go throughout the entire lineups of both teams, you got comparable people, like you look like at first base and you have Freddie Freeman, who's kind of been hobbled, but so is Anthony Rizzo. So, kind of a wash there. You have, it's been interesting, but to have 2 stars like an Ohtani and having an Aaron Judge, who are 2 really generational players, this is going to be, and then you have Soto, who's a beast of nature too. And then obviously Mookie Betts, who probably is as versatile a baseball player as we've had in a long, long time.
All right. Well, I'll add two things. Candy's going to go to a station break in a minute, talk about the book, and then some. But think about it. Mike Hampton left the Atlanta Braves to play for the Colorado Rockies only because he wanted to hit at Coors Field. Think about that. You know, and he hit a bunch of home runs. Of course, his ERA went to the sky when you go to Coors Field. I think they've made it a little bit pitcher friendly because of those humidifiers or humidors or whatever you call those things. So, I don't know what they are. He didn't have a no hitter for a while at Coors Field, but yeah, there's no question about it that I miss when a pitcher would go ahead and hit. It means you can help your own cause, and we don't see that no more. All right, with that said, let's go over to a station break with Candy Emily. Go ahead.
I'm going to quick say one thing because I want to tie back to what Larry had said about he thinks it's going to this series is going to go 7. There's been 119 World Series so far. Only 40 of them have actually lasted the full 7 games. So we'll see if this is number 41.
Okay.
With that being said, the South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book last November called Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by Scott, your host, the Motor City Madmouth Morganroth. The foreword is written by none other than George Eichhorn. It talks about Scott's 40 plus years in the media industry and how it has changed over those 40 plus years. It is available for you on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Apple, and Google Books. There's a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com, where there's also a plethora of all kinds of other great information. Go check out our website. There's also a link to our merchandise store where you can get a hat like George has, South Florida Tribune, or a sweatshirt or shorts. If you like to listen to podcasts, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Monday nights, we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday nights, you never know what we're going to be talking about. The same with Thursday, except we also throw in a little hockey on Thursday nights. If you want to advertise or sponsor a show, call Scott, 954-304-4941. Okay, back to you, Scott.
All right, thanks, Candy. All right, let's talk about Game 1 starter. We're all too familiar with him in Detroit. And Larry, I just want to mention something. I really have an admiration for the Yankees because I did work and cover the team for a few years. So, albeit I'm from a Tigers who are a good rivalry with the Yankees, you know what? When you cover the Yankees and you see the players that went through that system, I developed an admiration for them as well as Cincinnati Reds when they had a farm team up in Tampa with the Tarpons. So with that said, let's talk about Game 1. Okay, former Tiger Jack Flaherty been named the starter for Game 1 of the World Series on Friday night. So what are your thoughts, George, about Jack Flaherty?
Well, I liked him. I mean, he was a good pitcher here in Detroit for the part of the year that he was here. Obviously, the Tigers wanted to get some capital in return and traded him away, but he's done a good job for the Dodgers. He has had a very good year with both teams, it's Detroit and LA. And I like what he brings. I like he's more of a gutsy kind of starting pitcher that, really, quite frankly, really helped them out tremendously, to be honest with you. Like a saving grace because, with all the injuries the Dodgers had in that pitching staff, one after the other. So I'm not totally surprised. I mean, be honest with you, I don't know where he's going to end up after this season, but the most important thing is he helped them win that pennant, and he deservedly is being the starting pitcher in Game 1. So I like him. He's a good guy, and he's got some good qualities, and he's a good pitcher. That and basically, I'm happy for him as well. He's been in the league quite a number of years, but he has reached the World Series, and that's got to be really super exciting.
Okay, we'll turn over to Larry.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with him, especially with the injuries earlier in the year to Yamamoto and also Walker Buehler, who, has come back. Both of them have come back. But, getting somebody like Jack Flaherty, with experience and somebody, he's a bulldog and, give me the ball. And he was definitely a saving grace. And, obviously he was roughed up, in a couple of the postseason games by the Padres and the Mets. But, yeah, it's an honor to get the ball in game one, and obviously the biggest game of his career.
Yeah.
All right, turn over to Candy.
Not only is it the biggest honor, Larry, but it also sets him up so that he could pitch more than one time, start for more than one game, because that's what you do is you put your heavy pitchers in early, because then you can,
right,
if you need them, you can put him in a second or possibly even a third, because let's face it, after these 7 games, if it goes 7 games, they're done. Like, this is it. This is the pinnacle. This is what you have played your whole career probably for. It's awesome. It's an honor. He's going up against, a great pitcher as well. I think this will be very interesting, because I think, and this is the first time in a World Series you have 2 guys that have hit more than 50 home runs in the season, and this is the 6th time where in the World Series where you have the guys that have hit the most in from each league in the World Series. So I think there's a lot of bats in this series, and I think it'll be interesting to see if the bats win out more than the pitching does. I think you've seen a lot of World Series where the pitching wins out more, but I think this one we might see a lot more bats and a lot more runs.
All right. Well, the only thing I'll say about Jack Flaherty, and then I'm going to get to the question about the series, and then we'll talk about ticket prices, and then Larry and we can talk about Miami, Florida State. But here's what you've got here. You have a trade that will ultimately be a win-win situation for both teams. The Tigers signed Flaherty as a free agent, 1-year deal, right? That's all they signed him for. And they got some good quality work out of him up until they decided to trade him. And then they end up getting prospects. One of the prospects that was in return was Trey Sweetie. Detroit does make it to the postseason. So as any good general manager say, well, you'll have a trade that works in your immediate best interest, short term and long term. And, I won't say that, John Smoltz, okay, for Doyle Alexander can compare to it a little bit. But again, Doyle got you to the postseason, right? And he did what he had to do for 2 or 3 years. And John Smoltz, all he did was make it to the Baseball Hall of Fame and naturally won a World Series or so out in Atlanta. So it's a win-win situation. I'm happy Jack got the honor. And I think from what I heard, the reason why he had a lackluster showing against the Mets is I think he was sick before the game anyways, but he didn't want to mention it and decided to tough it out. Unfortunately, the Mets roughed him up pretty good. So, but nevertheless, the Dodgers came away with it. So I'm happy for Jack that he is going to pitch game 1. And you're right, Larry. Okay, it's an honor for anybody to pitch in game 1. Jack deserves it. And the Dodgers needed an arm, and this guy simply delivered. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about some of the things that we've talked about throughout the show that will bring them to the forefront. What are the most intriguing aspects of the World Series? And we'll talk about predictions. You know what, Candy? I want to start off with you. You were talking about it a little bit earlier. So give me some of the more intriguing aspects of it and give me your prediction.
There, one of the things that I thought was interesting is with Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, Judge, and Stanton, there are 5 players who have won MVP in their careers who will take the field in the Fall Classic. If all 5 appear, that would be the most former MVPs to play in a World Series. And let's face it, Clayton Kershaw would have made that 6, but obviously he's not going to be playing, so unfortunately. But that's pretty interesting. I also found some other interesting facts that said there have been 100. Wait, let me go back. Let me find what I was just at, because I just moved off from that one. One of the other interesting facts that I thought was that a trio of elite hitters, like I was saying before, Soto ranked 3rd among MLB qualifying players behind Judge and Ohtani. So here we have the sluggers of in this game. You don't see that necessarily all the time with the 3 of them. The Yankees have played in at least 35% of all World Series. Believe it or not, I thought that was interesting. And the longest World Series game in history took place Game 3 on October 26, 2018, between the Red Sox and the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Dodgers ended up winning 3-2. The game took 7 hours and 20 minutes. It was a marathon.
So, all right, Candy, I'll put you on the spot. Give me your prediction. Who's going to win the World Series?
Ooh, who's going to win it? I'm going to say Yankees in 7, but that's a tough one.
Well, predictions, Candy, are really never considered easy. But I got news for you. You've certainly given a lot of facts as to why the Yankees could walk out with their 28th World Championship, for which Joe Girardi was the manager of. All right, George, what about you? The most intriguing aspect of the World Series and a prediction.
Well, again, these teams are meeting for the 12th time. That's incredible. And but it's been a long, long time since they met. And that's, I think, what got everybody in baseball and in America excited. I think when you look at the roster, how deep some of these rosters are, especially for the Dodgers, I mean, it's hard not to go with them. As far as pitching goes, I think, maybe a small edge possibly to the Yankees, but I really do think that this is going to be something like Candy described, which is a hit fest. We saw large scores in the San Diego series, and we saw large scores in the Mets series. I mean, and of course the Yankees against Cleveland, and earlier against Kansas City. But it always comes down to pitching, but pitching isn't necessarily the strong suit for either one of these teams. The power is. And for that reason, I am going to say the Yankees will win this game in 7, but it's going to go all the way. It's going to be an exciting series. Fox Sports is lucky to have this as their defining moment, of course, in this year's sports calendar.
All right, well, I'm turning to my buddy Larry.
Well, the way I look at it is you look down the lineup at every position, and I think it's kind of even. Advantage Yankees at obviously center field and right field, with somebody like Soto and Judge. But then you go to third base where obviously the Dodgers have an advantage. I mean, obviously Gleyber Torres has played well at second. The catching, I think, between with Will and Wells, I think it's kind of like an even deal. I think their starting pitching is probably comparable to each other. I mean, obviously, this has been a good year for Carlos Rodon, so he's had an opportunity, coming off somebody, like a Garrett Cole. But I think the difference is going to be made is the bullpen. And I think the Dodgers have a slight edge, as far as setup and, the way they pitch consistently, not, just in a game or two. And obviously, if you look back at the series and the playoffs, from as far as the kid Luke Weaver had this is a guy who had a kind of a tough time as a starter before, and he's become a reliever and a really good one. But I'm going to go the Dodgers in 7 only because of the fact that I think that their relief pitching will probably be a little bit more consistent than the Yankees. From an offensive standpoint, the Yankees have an advantage because they've got a lot of power. I mean, between Soto and obviously Judge and Stanton, I mean, you've got well over 100 home runs just from 3 people. So they've got the power advantage. I think defensively, I think it's kind of a toss-up, both teams. Like I said before, you look at Rizzo and he's playing with broken fingers, and you look at Freddie Freeman and he's got a bad ankle. So, these are guys, whoever's going to gut it out more. But, I see the Dodgers winning it in 7.
All right, well, you know what? I got some interesting information. And since Larry and I have connections to the Marlins, at least the ones in the Florida State League, and I do cover them now, think about this for a second. Giancarlo Stanton's having a pretty good postseason and is really hungry for a ring. Jazz Chisholm ended up getting out of baseball purgatory, okay, because obviously he had an opportunity to play in New York, and Chad Chisholm was a pretty good contributor for the Yankees, right? John Birdie was one of the fastest guys on the team for the Marlins, and he's being utilized up there. And not only that, you have a lot of guys on that roster looking for their first championship ring. You got Aaron Judge, and the list goes on and on. But here's the thing. You know what this series reminds me of, Larry? This is going to really throw you for a loop here. This is going to remind me of 1979, the NCAA basketball championship, when you have Magic Johnson against Larry Bird, Indiana State versus Magic Johnson. Why am I saying that? Easy, okay? Shohei Ohtani versus Aaron Judge. Yeah, George touched on it for a moment. Fox will clean up with the numbers with the number one and number two media markets in the country. With that said, Yankees in 7. It's a lot of guys getting their first championship rings, and I always like to see guys get their first championship rings. All right, go to the chat room. Robert Wardell, Yankees going to spank the LA, and then the Dodgers in 6 BGP. So glad to have you both on the broadcast tonight. All right, last baseball topic of the night is the one that Larry will probably go off on. I have no problem. And then we talk about the Canes and the Seminoles. The cheapest seat for the World Series at Yankee Stadium in New York will be $1,675 plus. I told you these tickets change by the day, by the hour, because you never know what source you're getting them from. But I repeat, $1,675. The cheapest ticket at Dodger Stadium is $1,030 plus. So you can eat a few more Dodger dogs over at Dodger Stadium than you would be eating Coney Islands in New York. So, all right, Larry, you got the first word on this. What do you think about those ticket prices?
I said it before, it's absurd. And, the very fans that you want to support you during the regular season and during spring training are kind of out of the mix now. And that's not, I don't think that's a fair thing. Baseball has gone the way of all the corporate sponsors, and just like the Super Bowl, most of the seats that are purchased in the Super Bowl go to corporate sponsors. Obviously they pay billions for all these different rights, but that's why I kind of get soured on sports a lot, because as I said before earlier in the podcast, I think the important thing is to grab fans for the next generation to keep the flame alive, and for them to, if you live in New York or you live in anywhere, and then all of a sudden you're going there on special nights during Tuesday and Wednesday when I don't know, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, because now the Minnesotas and Kansas Cities are pretty good. But, getting like the Oakland A's, on a Tuesday and Wednesday, and all these kids are going out and supporting, and then all of a sudden they become real fans. And then, then it comes to the playoffs and the World Series, and there's no way they'll ever be able to get tickets. And that's the way I feel about it. I just think they've taken it out of the fans' their hands, because and I'm not, I know everybody's got to make $1, but then don't bitch and moan when time comes and you have 2,300 people on a Saturday or a Tuesday afternoon, for a game. It's just, you've created your own monster, and, you can't complain about it. And, like when they have the getaway days during the summer, and it's like 97 degrees, and, you're playing, like I said, you're playing California Angels, playing the Marlins, Miami. Don't bitch and moan when you get 9,500 people. It's just, you've created this monster, and and that's the way it is. So that's my word on it.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. Don't you think the Florida Panthers did a little bit of price gouging themselves, especially with the parking and all that, what they did there? Every team's going to do it when they know they can. There's a big demand, and now at that point, when you get
they know you'll pay it. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
that's why.
That's it.
That's why all the people with these gas prices, they're not busting their ass to get it back to 220 because they know you'll pay $3.25. And that's why I'm saying, because you have to. And it's unfortunate that we're in that type of life, and I don't foresee it, improving that much, and it's only going to get worse for the next generation. So just got to move on. That's all.
No question about it. Well said, by the way. I love your, because I do believe the same thing. If I were going to go to a World Series or any playoff game, the only way I'm going is I'm either going to cover it or I'm going to stay home. I really don't care. I have other things I want to do as we get deeper into this thing. And, is it worth to spend a couple grand to go when it's all said and done? Or for me, is it worth taking that couple grand and putting it toward a deposit to travel to Europe? And at this point in my life, I'm going to Europe. And that's it. I haven't been across a big pond anyways, but still, there are other fans that say, I've been to a World Series. In fact, you know what? The only World Series game I ever went to, Larry, was back in 1968 when my dad took me to the car and Earl Wilson was on the mound for the Tigers.
Wow, there's a name from the past.
Yeah, well, it is. 1968. My dad took me there. It was unbelievable. Talk about the father-son connection. My dad took me there, and Earl Wilson was on the hill. So to this day, I never forget. So, now if they want to go there for that reason, say they went to one, more power to them. It's, all it is money. You can't take it with you when you're not around no more. So, all right, George.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's called the entertainment business, and baseball is a big business. I checked out one of the sites today, and it's called Vivid Seats. The lowest price ticket they had available was $1,028. Okay. And the highest price they had was ridiculously $42,000. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. So yeah. And I agree with all the things that have been said, Larry, and the fans are the ones the true fans are the ones that get screwed, unfortunately, in a situation like this. The market bears the pricing, and if people and corporations want to pay those prices, I don't see anything going down in the future. I mean, it would just be probably unexpected, totally. I mean, so yeah, the fans that have to sit home or go to their favorite watering hole or restaurant to watch it, or some sort of block party or whatever, they'll still have fun, but unfortunately they will not be able to afford to get into Dodger Stadium or Yankee Stadium, and that's sad. That really is. And the high ticket gouging just continues to go on. I'm not a fan of that either. I think it's crazy, and I feel for those true fans out there. Yeah.
All right, back to the chat room. Okay, BGP says the Dodgers in 6. The Dodgers are the hotter team right now. No question about it. The Dodgers are playing good ball. And Phil, hell yeah, should be a great series. No questioning that at all. Thanks a lot, guys, for your contributions as well. And of course, Robert Wardell mentioned the Yankees going to spank LA. So with that said, Candy, let's talk about ticket prices.
Let's face it, it's become a who's who can afford to go to these. So it's the who's who is going to be in the stands. It's going to be, this movie star or this person, and you're going to see, he's there and she's there, and you're going to have your LeBron James, I'm sure, will show up, and all the different stars that are making lots of money because they're the ones that can afford those. Ticket prices for these events especially have gone through the wayside. You're not going to see a typical fan or a typical family. Families can't afford that anymore. There's no way. Prices have gotten way out of whack. And I was doing research looking at this earlier today. And I don't know do you guys know how much Shohei Ohtani's ball for his 50th home run
I
sold
saw it
for
was
at auction?
$3 million or something.
$4.392 million. It was the highest sale price for any ball of any sport in history. So just like that has gone astronomical, so have these ticket prices. These ticket prices are not for the average fan, for us we're going to sit there and watch it on TV.
I
mean, it was-
wonder if his former interpreter bought it.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah, well, that's a good one, Larry. Well, you know what though? He should get part of the proceeds to Skip Schumacher because number one, Skip Schumacher wasn't going to intentionally walk him anyways. He said, "The heck with it. I'm going to go out there and pitch to him anyways." I think what did he have, like 10 RBIs that day? So I
Greatest
don't know.
day in any baseball history of one single player.
Yeah, right. And Skip Schumacher, the former Marlins manager, had a hand in it. He said, "Oh,
Yep.
what? I'm not going to be here next year. I'm going to watch history right," and he let him get it over with. Great insight all the way around for you. I know that they were pretty high, but you know what? If fans are willing to pay it, well, so be it. All right, Larry and I.
one last prediction. My prediction is this will be one of the highest watched World Series that has ever been, partly because of the foreign aspect as well, not just the coast to
Right.
coast and the two big highest markets, but I think because of Shohei as well.
Yeah.
Well,
most definitely.
Well, let's not kid yourself. You know, Japan's going to watch it. And in fact, when Candy and I were out in the Cactus League covering the Angels, I don't remember who they were playing, but it was interesting. I think it was at the Oakland A's, I believe. I don't remember, but it was one of those teams out in Mesa. I believe it was Oakland. You know what? Tim Mead, I'm sure, Larry, you know who he is, right? One of my good
Yeah.
friends. You know, Candy and I had a chance to cover. She was taking pictures, and I was out there, you know, getting interviews, and it was just unbelievable when you think about the Japanese media that went out there and covered them. But Tim took care of me anyways. He said, "You know what? It is what it is. I'm credentialing, and that's that." So yeah, you're right, Candy. The Japanese contingent is just going to be unbelievable. In addition to what we're already looking at now with the national media, but at least Dodger Stadium can hold that extra media anyways. I believe it seats like 58,000 to begin with. So you know the Dodgers PR people and Major League Baseball media will accommodate as much of the demand that they can. All right. Well, you know what? On Saturday, we're going to change the subject to a little bit of college football. Larry and I, Candy, will be over at Hard Rock Stadium. Miami Hurricanes 6 wins, 1 loss, and the Florida State Seminoles 1-6.
No,
You
Miami
know-
hasn't lost. They're 7-0. Don't give them a loss.
Oh wait, that's right. Well, 7-0. Excuse me, but I'm glad you went out there and corrected me. 7-0 versus the 1-6 Seminoles. Larry, what do you think about this one? We all thought it was going to be a much better game than it would turn out to be, and now I have a feeling it could be one-sided, and Mike Norvell will be looking at the sky wondering what the heck happened this year. So yeah, 7-0 and 1-6. Some thoughts,
Yeah.
Larry.
Well, I'm not one of them that thinks it's going to be a runaway. It's a heated rivalry. They're going to have over 300 recruits on hand. If you look back, there's a couple of games that Florida State has played this year that would signal that they have the ability to keep the game close. Miami let up 605 yards of offense against California. Florida State beat them 14-9 for their only win. So you take a look at that game alone. And then last week against Duke, Florida State held Duke to 160 yards of total offense. So they're going to come and play. This is one of those Red River shootouts like Texas and Oklahoma, Florida State. 1988, Florida State came in number 1 in the nation, returned 17 of 22 starters. They were favored by 6 points at the Orange Bowl. Then the Hurricanes shut them out 31-0. So anything could happen in this game. I'm never going to say that, you could sweep a team like Florida State under the rug. Sure, on the surface, Scott, they're a 16 to 19 point underdog. And, the average person would say, yeah, this isn't going to be much of a game. But Miami's been making a lot of mistakes. Their defense has been horrible, just horrible over the last 3 games. And they could have easily lost in California. They were down by 25. They could have easily lost to Virginia Tech, where Virginia Tech really outplayed them. And then last week against Louisville, there was a couple of plays here and there. Cam Ward has bailed them out the entire season during these tough games. I don't think that Florida State has the offensive personnel that a Louisville or a California or a Virginia Tech does, but you mentioned Mike Norvell. He's a really good coach, and they want to come in, and there's going to be plenty of Florida State fans there. They know that this game could be their entire season. If they upset Miami, they may finish 2-8 or 2-10, but this game right here, and I'm not saying that Florida State's going to win, but you just can't come into this game thinking that it's just going to be a runaway, and I just don't think it will be. I think Miami wins the game, but I don't think it's going to be a runaway. I think Florida State has too much pride. This game has always been too big, and like I said, there's going to be a whole lot of Florida State fans in at the game.
Well, let me piggyback off of what you're saying, Larry, okay? And that's this. Non-conference, Miami had their way with every opponent, including the Florida Gators. Conference, like you just pointed out, these games have been challenging. Cam Ward has had to play in the entire fourth quarter, whereas before it was about when Mario Cristobal would take him out, whether it was the third or the beginning of the fourth quarter. So anytime you get in the ACC and you start playing conference foes, then things start to tighten up a little bit. And yes, the fact that this is a rivalry game has a lot to do with the motivation. People can say all day long when you're dealing with in-state rivalries that, Michigan, Ohio State, you know what? You can lose other opponents, but you need to beat Ohio State, or in their case, Michigan State. Well, but that's what you've got here, okay? This is a season saver if you're a head coach, is what it is in most cases. The fan base will look the other way. But but again, you're right. Cam Ward was unbelievable. And, the Miami has a lot of great receivers. Xavier Restrepo is going to play on Sunday. I know he will. This guy, all he does is just keep climbing the ladder in terms of receiving yards. And the list goes on and on. I don't have to reiterate all the other receivers. But Cam Ward's been proven that he can run with his legs. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Florida State does. I haven't seen as many of these games as you have, but we did make the trip to Tallahassee last year. It was fun to watch the game over at Doak Campbell Stadium. I really enjoyed it, and I couldn't believe how much the Seminole fans get into it. But when you go to a venue for the first time, like we did, Tallahassee's a pretty good football town. It really is, with the history behind it.
Yeah, I think this would be Miami's biggest attendance of the year, and obviously, at other places you talk about the big house in Michigan, and you talk about all the SEC schools where they look at Florida State the week that Miami left, and they had 90-something thousand. You guys were there. It was the week after against Samford where they had the same 90,000. See, Miami will play in front of 65,000 for Florida State, but when they play Duke next week, they could have 35,000, and that's and that's what I'm trying to say. So Miami has never been a college football town. They've always had really good programs, but where everybody now is coming out and saying that Miami's getting calls and the referees want them to win, and no way. Miami's been irrelevant for the last 23 years. They've been a 500 team for the last 4 or 5 years. So to me, what's happening now is, like I said before, last year and the year before, Miami would have lost the last 3 games. They would have. It's just, but you see the makeup on this team right now. And, obviously, but like I said, this is a game, just like you said, Ohio State, Michigan. This is a game based on recruiting. There's going to be a lot of these high-profile kids who will be at the game, and certainly Florida State knows that, and they want to come out and play as good as they can play. And that's, I know all the Miami fans, and we're going to kill them. Yeah, you know what? You could. But here's the thing. The reality of it is that this is a different type of game. I've seen many Oklahoma-Texas games where one team is, huge favorite, but the other team ends up winning. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm still kind of those skeptical guy. Even though Miami's 7-0, I'm kind of still thinking about Tennessee, Middle Tennessee State, and games against Western Michigan, and games like where Miami should have never lost or even been in. Southern Mississippi 2 years ago, Miami should have just blown them away, but they didn't. So, Mario Cristobal's done a great job. He changed the roster around. I think this is one of those games where, and here's the thing too, even though Florida State's 1-6, don't you think that, because I kind of made a joke after they lost last week, before I knew the game time, that this would be at 9:00 in the morning on Home Shopping Network. I mean, rather than be 7:00 on ESPN. So somebody knows something. It's an entertaining game, and I think that everybody understands. Florida State's on a 3-game winning streak. Miami owns the series 35-33, and it's been a competitive. You remember 2 years ago, right here at Hard Rock Stadium, Florida State crushed them 45-3. So I think that's in the back of Miami's mind too.
Right. Well, one other thing I should mention about that Louisville game, now that we talked about it, is this: Mario Cristobal had not won a game after a bye week up until last week as the Miami Hurricanes coach. So, but obviously he got that demon out of his pocket. So, I agree with you. I think the score is going to be 7 or less than that, but we'll see. I'm not in the business to make prognostication. We're in the business to go out there and talk about the facts and let fans draw their own conclusion. Candy, really quickly, is there anything that you want to add to it?
No, I think I've said enough on all fronts tonight. Again, I appreciate you guys.
No problem. I'm asking Candy if she has anything.
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking me.
No, that's all right.
That's okay. The one thing I think we also should remember, though, Florida State is without their number 1 quarterback. He injured his hand. He's expected he possibly would be out for the season. That makes a difference. Now, the question will be, will Miami's running game set up enough for Cam Ward, or will Cam Ward have to be throwing it all the time to, like he has the last couple of games at the end, to come up and win at the end of the game? So I think some of those will be kind of the tough keys to the game. Running game, will our offensive line hold their defense so that we can open up holes for our running game? And then what will their quarterback do as well?
I know, George, obviously this is a topic that you're not as familiar with, but I just will say this. Eichhorn will have his own in-state rivalry to deal with on Saturday night. He's going to have Michigan and Michigan State, and Michigan having a tough year because they can't identify a quarterback. Is Sharon more over his head? Those will be questions that will probably be answered over the weekend. So with that said, what we're going to do now is what we always do at the end of the show. We're going to let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. And Larry, I certainly want you to do everything in your power to promote what you do. And I can. Once again, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Saturday, as I always do when we get together. And I still am looking forward to the day that you and I can just sit there and watch a baseball game together and reminisce about what we've done. But that said, Larry, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. I know you do some great work covering prep sports. So
yeah, Prep Red Zone Florida FL on my as you can see on my name right there. A lot of around the state football. LarryBluestein.com is where we have a lot of South Florida stuff. Our radio show every Monday night on WQAM here in Miami, which is, the flagship station for the Heat and the Panthers and the Hurricanes. And, we have a podcast every Monday evening called the 6 Ring Canes. And I'm just, doing what I can do. I'm still on this side of the dirt, and I'll, as long as I'm doing that, I'll be fine.
Well, like I said, Larry, there aren't a lot of people I can say I've known over 40 years, but I'm just glad that you are one of those. Of course, you're sitting alongside of George Eichhorn, who's known me that much time. So I got to talk about 2 individuals on this show that I've known for a combined total of like 84 or 85 years. To me, that shows what relationships and friendship is all about.
Just means we're all getting old, Scott.
We're all getting old. But you know what, Larry? I'll tell you one thing. When you and I started working together many years ago in the 80s,
I had hair then too,
Yeah.
So
well, I'm covering my head up. Okay, I have my hair, but it's on my face, not on the top of my head, and we're a coconut. So, but yeah, we all did. But one thing about us is we may have less hair, but we got more stories. And believe me, tonight, for those folks that had an opportunity to watch and listen to this show, then you definitely got a lot of history with not only baseball, but at the end, the Canes and the Seminoles.
No doubt.
All right, George, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you. I know you wrote a book as well, George.
Yeah, you can reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com, on Twitter or X. I'm at SandGSports99. I write for the South Florida Tribune and the Motor City Tribune. There's a copy of my book.
Wow, look at that.
at the end of my articles, there's always a link there to take you to purchase the book if you're so interested, or you have the connection to Michigan or Detroit. You'd love it. And Scott's in the book. I'm in the book. And so many of our dear friends, including the late Ernie Harwell, the late Paul Carey, and the late Bob Reynolds. I mean, there's so many great people. And it was a labor of love. But thank you all for
Beautiful.
listening and following. And look forward to next week's show.
Yep. I
And
appreciate
Larry,
you guys.
Well, Larry, you'll be getting your copy on Saturday. So there you go.
Okay.
Just make sure you have a big enough briefcase to put it in there. I'll even authorize it. But thanks a lot for joining
All right,
us today,
guys.
Larry. I'll see you Saturday night, buddy.
All
Good
right.
night.
Thanks. All right, George. Thank you, Candy. We'll
Thank
see you
you.
Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Candy, take us home.
The South Florida Tribune Publishing Company published a book, Lessons from the Microphone, Tuning into the Enduring Wisdom of Visionary Leaders. It is written by your host, Scott, the Motor City Mad Mouth Morgenroth. The foreword is written by the other gentleman in this panel right now, George Eichhorn. It talks about Scott's 40 plus years in the media industry and how it has changed over those 40 plus years. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, Apple, and Google Books. There's also a link on our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. There also on our website, there is a link to our store that has sweatshirts, t-shirts, hats, shorts, you name it, with South Florida Tribune logo on it. Go ahead and go get yourself a hat or a sweatshirt today, since it's starting to get cooler out there for those of you that live in the north. Those of us down here in the south, you can go get a t-shirt or a baseball cap. But you can also check out our website that has lots of great articles. Scott writes, George writes, I take pictures. We have outside media distribution partners that send us content. So go check out our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. If you see the red subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner, that means you have not subscribed to the South Florida Tribune's YouTube channel. Honestly, at this point, I do not know why you wouldn't, because it's just the best channel out there. Monday nights, we talk baseball. Tuesday nights, we talk football. Wednesday nights on Sports Exchange, like you're listening to here, you never know what we're going to be talking about. Tomorrow night, we have the hockey show, which is Fire Up Florida. And then following that, we have Fire Up, which again is a show you never know what you're going to see on that show, except it's the one show on the channel I host weekly. So you'll have to check it out tomorrow, approximately 9:00 p.m. I'm also on a Chicks podcast Tuesday nights at 7:30. It's either 3 Chicks in a Pod or Chicks and Salsa. We talk Chicks talking sports. You'll have to check us out. If you want to advertise or sponsor one of our shows, call Scott 954-304-4941. If you missed any of what I've recently said, it's all been scrolling around along the bottom, or you just hit the rewind button if you're listening to us wherever you get your podcast. Scott, great show. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Candy. And I want to thank Larry Bluestein for joining us tonight. Also, hope to have JB Ellis back next Wednesday night. I know JB's been taking care of some family business in New York City. So, JB, you're always in my heart and prayers. You're a good friend of mine, like a brother. And of course, Candy thinks the world of you, and George as well. So, meanwhile, glad that Larry came on. We'll come up with a better person than that to talk about the World Series, and Larry Bluestein himself. Him and I covered a lot of baseball back in the days in the 1980s. George Eichhorn, it would have been interesting if you would have been around to see us run around the state and do what we were doing. But a good show tonight. And if you missed anything, you can always watch it again. So, meanwhile, on behalf of Larry Bluestein, Candy Ebling, George Eichhorn, my name is Scott Morgenroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Sports Exchange. We will see you next week. Have a good night, everybody, and a good week. Bye now.
Enjoy the World Series.
Bye-bye.